Good afternoon, everyone. Just want to welcome everyone to another episode of Office Hours. My name is Stuart Newsom, Vice President of Marketing here at Infinix. I'm actually joined by our Chief Strategy Officer, Chuck Rackley, who's one of our leading experts and subject matter experts, so to speak, in the subject of denials management. So just want to kick things off. We're actually discussing today, believe it or not, which is probably the bane of everyone's existence, those remittance advice notices and how to handle those, commonly known as CARTs and RARCs, with those denial codes that are associated with those. I know it's been a big issue among a lot of denial management administrators, practice management administrators. Anyone that's had to deal with a denial just knows from experience that dealing with these denial codes can be a real pain in the neck, so to speak. And it's no surprise. They're really, when you look at the denials management process, you receive that admittance advice notice. You have to correlate that CARC and RARC on those claims to determine, well, what can I appeal? What adjustments can I make? What corrections and resubmissions have to do? I have to get down to the root cause and then consider some write-offs. And if you listen to last week's episode, I discussed some of the hidden cost of reworking a claim in there, and that's part of the factor. This is what I was talking about during that episode, but wanted to expand on it in this episode. And that's been my experience, Chuck. I don't know if you can add anything to that, what you've seen out there in the environment, and what people are dealing with.
Yeah, I'd say the biggest issue that I see, Stuart, is just quantifying the problem in general, understanding what's real, what's fake, what's a hard denial, what's a soft denial. And I tell you, a lot of people struggle with the nomenclature itself on exactly how to even think about what they're seeing on these remittance advices. So a common issue that we see is, this is a good example is the request for additional information denials that we see come in. Some people will fight you until they're blue in the face that that's a real denial. And I've had arguments the other way. So I feel like if I was running a debate team, I could argue it for either side. But some people will really, they struggle identifying what's a real denial and how to correlate that into their performance. That's probably the biggest issue I see.
Yeah, and that's a great point, because a denial is not always a denial. You may have something that is just a return to the provider. And to your point, I believe like the CO16 is maybe something you're referring to, where most people don't count that as a denial. I wouldn't, because they're asking for additional information. They haven't really read it yet. They're just telling you, hey, we need to take a deeper look at this. So they may roll that into their denial management metrics, so to speak. It's going to be a false positive, if you will. So I definitely get that. So that's an excellent point.
For sure. I almost think about it, an 835 is not so much, these are your denials. It's more about these are your responses. So so it's like if you ask your parents to go to the movie theater, go ask your dad as a kind of a request for different information rather than a flat out denial. So there's a lot of different sections in that, and some of them are just informational only, where they're actually paying it, but they're telling you something else. So instead of thinking as the whole 835 as a denial, remit, think of it more like a response remit.
Oh, absolutely. And I like to coin the phrase denialese. I kind of came up with that, the language. I even came up with a phrase called coding ease, because payers use codes, CPT, diagnosis codes, modifiers, in order to understand what's going on with an encounter. Well, likewise, the payers are sending back to the providers codes that tell them this is what I need. Either it is denied, or it is rejected, or I need additional information. And those reason codes are to articulate that. And in a way, I like to take a step back, because you mentioned earlier, kind of understanding the terminology, understanding the messaging coming back. Just wanted to define, what is CARCs and what is RARCs. And I bring this up because I know we make big assumptions sometimes, and the assumption is that the denials management world knows what we're talking about when we say CARCs and RARCs, especially with my Southern accent. Sometimes I can draw it out a little bit. But And you can actually go to HIPAA, or actually HIPAA has dictated this to x12.org. You go to x12.org, you can see all the definitions of these CARCs and RARCs. But essentially, they're reason codes, they're denial codes, they're remittance codes. And you look at the CARC, that's just claim adjustment reason code. It's just a group of codes that could be starting off with two letters, and then it's ended up with two numbers. You may have a CO, you may have a PR, which is patient responsibility. CO means contractual obligation. OA is other adjustment. So the list goes on and on. The RARCs, on the other hand, are additional information, remittance advice for mark codes. That's just additional information that needs to be added to the CARC. So I think of it this way: there are some CARCs that can stand alone, but RARCs can never stand alone. So CARCs may need RARCs, but RARCs will always need CARCs, so to speak. So just kind of giving the lay of the land there of what these are and what they actually mean. And you can do a deep dive into the fact you look up, go to x12.org and look up those definitions. And they are standardized. Every payer is mandated to use these codes. But here's the catch, and I want to get your take on this too, Chuck, if you can. It just seems that, and I know that they can use it however they want. So that's why they're a lot of times they're very ambiguous. So you'll notice that there's no standardization that it means the same thing across payers, even though it was designed like that. And I think the mandate missed the pitch a little bit, took a strike at this when it just didn't realize that these payers are going to take liberties to define what that CARC means for their organization and in their plans.
Yeah, for sure. And we see that even regionally different inside of payers. So like payers like United, Blue Cross that have a lot of different subsections of their payer. I think is as many people think payers are all very well organized. Anyone who's ever worked for a payer can tell you it's anything but that. And most payers can't even tell you how their reimbursement tables work, much less their remark codes back to the individual providers. So you can even see differences if your organization has several different locations across the country. Even inside payers, they might be different on how to work individual CARCs and RARCs. So it is a huge issue, like you said, to really get down to specifics and have SOPs on each set. And that unfortunately, there's no rule book for this. There's nothing online that says for a Blue Cross in Illinois, work it this way versus one in Georgia. This is something that you just kind of have to get through the hard way and figure out how to work this on each individual in case.
Right, exactly. And that's why it's so important to stay up to speed on those policies and on those changes, because they'll change what they mean by these. And you'll have to just stay up to speed. Look at your payer mix and make sure you're diligent in looking at those policies, or doing the research, do your homework. It's going to take a lot of time, but if you do this ahead of time instead of in the moment, that's some of the things I suggest is be sure you set a cadence of when you're checking all of these policies out and see what these, if there's any change to those CARCs and RARCs that they have and how they define them. Because if you wait till in the moment, then that's just going to delay payment even further. There's more revenue that you're losing in the cost to rework those claims. And it can add up really, really quickly. And we've been stating a little bit some of the issues that are with the denials process. Can you discuss what RCM professionals are facing of some of the main issues that they have?
Sure. Yeah, I'll tell you, even some of the larger organizations we do business with, the technology issues continues to plague even the most seasoned professionals on how to do this. And it really comes down to a couple different things on how you're getting these remittance advices kind of distilled. So 15 years ago, a boss of mine showed me this very complicated Monarch model, and it kind of distilled this down and into Excel, into Access, and had to spit it out 3 different ways. And that was pretty arduous. And in some companies still are working in that way, where they're having to download these massive files into databases and kind of do it themselves to try to get any kind of information out of it. I feel it's terrible to have that. It's almost impossible to make any kind of real-time assumption on what's happening there, or
Right.
even near-time assumption. There's a different flavor of that where some people are looking at their Carks and Recs through their clearinghouse. That's probably the most common way we see it happen, where they're having some sort of ERA manipulation happening, and they're giving them some reporting. And then sometimes it's in the EMRs. So you see some EMRs have an ingestion engine here where they can work with the clearinghouses or the billing scrubbers to get some of that information in there. So some of the bigger ones like Cerner and Epic, even Meditech, have some of this capability. But what really separates, the pros from the amateurs here is the ability to really take that from massive data and turn it into information. That's where really people struggle, and what to do with it after that. So it's not hard to see that there's a denial code on this one. What gets hard for people is when there's multiple denials. That happens all the time, where you can have multiple denials on one CPT.
Right.
You can have multiple, especially if it's an inpatient account, you can have several denials. It's stack ranking those in order of importance. How do we work those? And then to a better question, how do we stop that from happening?
Right.
So most people are behind the eight ball from a technology perspective already. And that's before you even start talking about their processes and procedures. So most people, like we talked about before, are extremely reactive. They're working things just as they come in. And sometimes it's even a situation where they don't even know that a denial is on the account until they start to follow up on it. I can't tell you how many times we've seen AR units that their procedure is to go on the portal or call in to the insurance company to check status, and just to find out there's a denial, and then have to throw it in some other workflow. Especially if you're not working from the same place, that just slows everything down, and it slows down your reimbursement over time. So the best way we've seen this done is to have some sort of workflow engine that can know that these accounts are in a denial status before it has to be followed up on, and have a specialized person work those, and then kind of work backwards from there.
Right. Right. And then you throw in there the staff shortages that
Oh yeah.
definitely that we're still feeling the effects of the Great Resignation. I mean, COVID was what, 4 years ago,
Mhm.
and we're still short staffed. And then even when we weren't short staffed, I'd saw issues where there seemed to be one or two people that just knew everything. They had that muscle memory on how to work these denials. And then when they went on vacation or had to be out sick, then everything just seemed to shut down. And you just can't have that. There just needs to be certain, again, it speaks back to processes and procedures on, cross training, and also having the right tools in place. I'm a firm believer that technology has advanced enough with AI, automation, machine learning, where it can remedy some of the staff shortages, where the existing staff can work smarter
Mhm.
and not necessarily harder. I know cliches. I'm not a big cliche person, but that's definitely an adage that you can apply here.
For sure. And I think one silver lining to this problem is that whenever there's big issues like this, it usually is a catalyst for us to innovate,
Mm.
as an organization, as a market, as an industry. And one of the things that everyone likes to say these days is the AI, RPA, ML, all these things that, you hear at all the conferences that, everybody can do. This area right here in denials is probably the best use case that I've seen actually work. A lot of people will try to tell you about, this is going to be a completely automated process, and most of the time it doesn't work. But in denials, there are a few use cases that make a ton of sense for RPA, specifically. The one I'm
Right.
thinking about is the one we started talking about, the CO16 additional information request, medical record request, things like that. What we've seen really work well in those situations is a bots that can actually, read a portal, go out there and see what was requested, if it's an op note or, discharge summary, anything like that, and actually pull it and resubmit the claim back to the payer. I've seen this happen where we can actually automate that entire process from the queue through the portal, through Availity, through Carry On, whichever one, and actually take the human completely out of it. So the good news about that is that we're starting to see a lot more bots like that as a result of all these carcs that are coming in. Now that comes with a whole lot of other problems too, Stuart. But it's good to see that we're starting to make some big strides there for sure.
Oh, that's awesome. So it sounds like even these bots could even identify the root cause, so to speak, or some of, is
Yeah,
that what you're saying?
well, it's not. I wouldn't say the bot's doing that. The bot's really just kind of taking some menial work out of our bank. Now, machine learning can actually do that. So, but the machine learning is going to have some more information to do that. So it's going to have, a much longer history of what's happened there, what the actual results were. So to say, for a whole year of time for this specific CARC, was it paid? Was it not paid? Was it overturned? Here was the root cause for it, and that we are starting to see some results for. But what we're actually using that for, which is interesting, it's not so much root cause analysis we're using that for, it's workforce prioritization. So
Mm.
which denials we want to work first, because these are the ones I can actually get overturned versus these are the ones that I have no shot at and I don't want to waste my time. So
Right,
where root cause is definitely a part of it, the machine learning and that part of it really comes into how do I work these accounts.
right, right. That makes total sense. And it seems over years, I've been doing this for a very, very long time. I think you have been doing this a long time as well. And it seems I see the top denials every year consistently come across, like patient authorization, patient eligibility, even provider eligibility. There's always coding errors, the same old coding errors, um, misuse of modifiers. I mean, I just attended a virtual conference the last couple of days, and modifier 25, people were still asking about modifier 25.
Mm-hmm.
Timely filing is also huge. And, coverage of policies. These always seem to be the top. And I keep telling myself, you know, when are we going to wake up and solve the problem for all this? With prior authorization, with eligibility, appropriate use of modifiers. Medical necessity is a huge thing. I mean, we can do a whole session on medical necessity, and
Sure.
and that term itself is very ambiguous. It means different things to different people.
Mm-hmm.
But what are some of the top denials that you see, and then how basically we have processes in place to assist with that?
You mentioned several of the most common offenders, prior auth, MedNest, coding denials probably being the most. The other one that jumps out to me a ton is duplication. So duplicate
Oh yeah.
claim filed. That one's kind of irritating. That happens, and a lot of this stuff, like you mentioned, happening on the front end of the rev cycle is preventable. So when we start to look at, really what's preventable versus non-controllable, there's the weight is way down on preventable. There's not much happening here. So when you finally get to the point where most of your denials are not preventable, then you're doing a good job. But I haven't seen a shop yet that was clean
Right.
to do. Some other ones that we talked about, attachments missing, or um, just kind of weird stuff where stuff happens after termination, or modifier issues. Non-covered's a big one that comes out there for sure.
No, absolutely. And one of the things when you want to consider, when you're trying to correct some of your denials issues and looking at these denials is obviously we've talked about identifying root cause and how important that is. But it's also about scalability, that bringing it to scale. Because again, it kind of speaks back to the staffing shortages. Just one example. There's other examples of scalability, but you just want to make sure that it can be mass produced across the entire organization, especially if you're a large organization.
Right.
And I know everyone likes to work in silos, and everyone likes to put their payers in silos because you may have one person who's just the Blue Cross expert, another person is the Medicare expert, and so make your processes and procedures very scalable, and it can apply across the board, um, and then setting that as standards. Um, another issue is reportable analytics. How analytics really plays a part of this. And everyone, I know when I hear analytics, You just think, oh, it's just the basic stuff, how much can you improve on with analytics? But I always wanted to see if you could speak a little bit more to the power of analytics when they're done right.
Yeah, I will, but real quick before you reminded me of something just now when you're talking about those silos. Right, just if you don't mind, right before we go
Oh,
into
sure.
analytics.
Yeah, yeah. Let's back up.
So the kind of a byproduct of specialization, not a good byproduct, but a bad one, is that when we become so specialized, especially in the back end, where we're just focused on one process or another instead of kind of a across the board process, and then having different ownerships from patient access coding and billing and collection and denials management, that's where we see a lot of communication breakdown over time. The most common one we see is that there's usually a CFO or COO, and they have reporting to them a back office leader and a front office leader. And inevitably, what happens here is that the denials start coming in. CFO knocks on the rev cycle back end leader's door, says, "Hey, what the heck? Why are denials through the roof?" And 9 times out of 10, they're going to point to the other office and say, "Well,
Right,
they can't get it together."
right,
That's usually what happens, and it's very indicative of lack of clear communication between those departments and coordination of what's happening from an analytics perspective.
right.
So definitely one of the big remedies that we see and we usually recommend is it's not rocket science, Stuart. It's a denial committee, if you will. So what we've seen be extremely successful is just having a forum where everyone sits down at a table to solve a problem rather than start to point fingers. Look at analytics from a very objective point of view. Hey, here's the denials that are coming in. Let's do some root cause analysis together and do some process improvement. And it's much easier to fix this stuff from the front office than the back office.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
even if you have an overturn rate that is 99%, to use your words from last week, it's a hidden factory. It's just part of the machine that slows everything down,
Mhm.
and it's definitely a killer of cost to collect and balance sheet improvement. So definitely something to think about if you don't have a denial committee set up between your front office and back office leaders. That's something I would definitely set up.
Right,
When we
right.
and when we talk about analytics, it's important to come at that from a place that everyone kind of agree on facts. In our world today, be it something complicated like politics or you know very very objective like sports, that's not objective at all,
Yeah, I
but
know.
just agreeing on one set of facts that we're going to go from is very important, and that's where analytics comes in. So to make sure everyone's reading from the same hymnal, knows exactly what the score is, cannot be overstated the importance of that.